Howdy, folks. Before this video starts, I gotta apologize. I shot this without my lights on in here, and it's a little grainy. I didn't notice it while I was shooting on my little screen. It wasn't quite enough to show up, and I just didn't think. I'm sorry. I don't have time to reshoot the whole thing, so I shot this apology with the light on. Anyways, I've got a couple of little things to cut in here, but enjoy the video. Good afternoon, folks. I'm Ross Weaver. I'm here today to do a little video talking about Death Stranding 2's new trailer. Everybody's been doing a video analyzing the new Death Stranding 2 trailer and talking about all these things that they've seen and pointed out, and I got to make one of these videos. It's just there's too many of those. Like I said, too many of those videos are out there that are good, but also there's a lot of things to be said. So it's like it's probably gonna take a lot of videos to say everything, right? So hopefully I can add some new stuff to the whole conversation here in this video. I've got basically 12 little points on my notes that I took going through the whole trailer. It felt like it was kind of divided into 12 parts. Each part there's kind of a different person you can focus on. I would say a different character that's kind of being brought up in each of those 12 parts. And I'm going to go through them one at a time, and I'm not going to try to pick through every single last thing. These are just the thoughts that I've had when I go through this trailer again and watch it again when I'm just sitting here watching, because I've watched it so many times already. So anyways, let's get started. The first thing that you got to notice, the guy, when the trailer pops up, who's the guy with the glasses? Well, that's George Miller, and that's his likeness. And there's of course a voice actor giving him a different voice. It's not George Miller's voice, but I'm calling him Captain George. He seems to be the captain of the boat, and the boat's the Magellan. Also, I'm not going to be bringing up a lot of my usual styles. I'm not going to cut in a lot of footage of this trailer. Y'all have all seen the trailer, hopefully, plenty of times, and you don't need to just hear me talk over more footage of the trailer and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully, you guys know what I'm talking about here, and this stuff doesn't require freeze frame or zoom in and stuff like that. So, apologies if you're expecting footage, you're not going to get any. But that's just that's how I roll here. So, anyways, Captain George. He's got a cool outfit on. Go check it out. The pins that he has on his jacket. His hats, it's like a classic kind of ship's captain hat, but it's also a little bit of a different color scheme. It's a little darker, right? A lot of naval uniforms typically are a little bit lighter in scheme. There's usually some white in them somewhere. His uniform's kind of lacking white. That's one thing I noticed. So you can keep that in mind. The big thing to note about him is his right hand is missing, and it looks like sheared off very smoothly, very cleanly. And he's got some chiral contamination on sort of the stump that's left there, I guess is what you would call it. And he uses this in the trailer in many different ways. It appears he can sort of use it like a multi-tool. And he can hook up this arm to little tools and use it kind of like a bionic arm a little bit. The first thing he does that we see is he's using this saw, that his hand is inside the saw as if it's like a little bionic arm prosthetic thing. And the saw is hooked up to the arm. So maybe the saw is even powered by his arm. There's some crazy stuff to be kind of considered from all of that. And then we also see he's able to replace that with just like a regular looking hand. So, yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. The hand is kind of it's a thing I've been talking about in the Metal Gear Solid V videos, how your arm and a missing arm or missing hand is kind of evocative of a missing experience. And all that stuff's probably kind of relevant here with his name being George, and how much as I've talked about V is also George. This being his right arm being kind of a chiral arm. As in chiral as in the other side, right? There's also, there's also a pretty strong comparison to be made with Captain James Hook from... I always go straight to the Spielberg Hook, but you can go to the Disney cartoons and stuff too and find plenty of stuff there. But there's one particular shot of Dustin Hoffman as Captain Hook with his arm up in kind of the same pose, but mirrored that Captain George has got with his arm. although he's lacking a hook, but he's still got this pointy bit, on his arm. It's kind of sharp, right? So there's kind of a a tool or weapon kind of context to his arm in the same way that Captain Hook's is. Of course, if you've seen the movie, Hook switches out his hook arm with other stuff during the movie, and it's kind of cool, actually. I thought as a kid, at least. And that seems to be what's going on here with Captain George, is he can kind of swap his arms out, do different stuff with it. So where's his hand? That's kind of my big thing that I think I haven't seen a lot of people talk about. Is it seems like at some point in the past he probably got in a fight with a BT, and it probably ate his hand. Now, if you think about what would happen if a BT ate, say, about this much of a person's hand and swallowed it, a fist is not that much matter to combine with antimatter, but it's still enough probably to make some kind of a reaction, some kind of an explosion, right? And if you look at how his arm is, it doesn't look like it was bitten off. It looks like it was sheared off in a very straight, kind of very clean kind of cut, right? The kind of cut that you might expect maybe from the edge of a void out. So what I'm guessing is this BT probably ate his hand, and he probably pulls his arm out just enough to get it away that hand is left in that BT's stomach and probably creates an antimatter-matter reaction, a void out. But it wasn't very big because the hand wasn't very big. It was probably big enough to kill the BT and encompass it, and then maybe whatever little part of his arm that was left, maybe a little bit of it got clipped by sort of the edge of the horizon of this void out, and that's why it's a smooth cut, and that's why he's maybe also got the chiral contamination. The chiral contamination left on his arm might not just be from like a BT biting him. It might be from a BT biting him and the sort of the contact with the void out, and sort of that contact with the other side, right? Another thing I forgot to mention with Captain George's hand is I think the reason we see Sam fighting a hand BT boss is that's probably his hand. After it was eaten by a BT and caused that matter-antimatter reaction, the hand would have sort of gone to the beach, right, and would have become a sort of the basis for a BT. And that's why we see a BT hand that he's fighting, which gets into a whole topic about how it appears these BT's forms come from a BT eating something in that form, essentially. So the lion came from being eaten by a BT. The whale, and what was the other one? The dolphin, and the giant. So I think all of those, it implies some history there, possibly, in how those BTs were created originally. Is perhaps that the big one that we see, I don't know, maybe that was how the Goliath was created. Maybe a person got eaten, or maybe that's how it may not be like so much as an entity that was eaten, so much as, well, what does the lion relate to? I've talked about it in the lectures on Metal Gear Solid V. The necklace that Shibani has is a lion necklace, the one that Quiet goes after when it gets thrown into the pit. I think that the reason it's a lion in Death Stranding, you can't just see them as unrelated. It's too obvious to me of a connection to make it so, or to not make it. So I think you've got to go down there and figure out why the lion's connected across Death Stranding and the Phantom Pain. And I think it's because it's like they've been sort of redacted, right? All the stuff I was talking about how the story from 75 to 84 had to get kind of redacted, and all the real origins of all of the Foxhound soldiers kind of had to get thrown into this sort of black ops pit of history where it can't come back out. And that black pit is kind of like, that's the tar, that's the source of where all these BT monsters are coming from. It's kind of like the stuff that was redacted. So the giant, that's probably related to the giant, Chico Monkey Venom that I was talking about, the Gohan stuff. Like I said, the lions relate. The dolphin's a curious one. The dolphin relates, maybe to how I was talking about the desert is the ocean. Now there's kind of some hidden aquatic context in the Phantom Pain. But this is a whole topic. Maybe the BT coming from the hand is kind of a big hint that he's given us here, and so maybe there's a lot more lore that he's going to explore within the game. But with that said, and I'll circle back around to this topic at the very end when I talk about the very last thing I'm going to talk about here. But his arm, it's kind of like a puppeteer's arm, is kind of what I think of it as. It's like something that he can use to manipulate other stuff. And since his hand is kind of a phantom hand, right? It's sort of like all of those nerve connections and all those nerve endings that are in a normal hand are gone for him. But it's like the other end of those connections are still there. So maybe you could think of it as like through these chiral connections, he can do a whole lot of stuff with his hands, all of its connections and stuff. I suspect that's how he pilots and I guess drives the ship. If you notice, he shoves his arm into a console at one point that's got some chiralium in this one little receptacle, I guess you'd call it. And as soon as he does that, the ship kind of comes alive. So it seems like he actively pilots the ship with his missing hand, which is kind of cool. The other thing to mention with him that's kind of shown in the same context of his hand and all this stuff going on, he's got this cat. He's got this, looks like a chiral cat that's got these wings and its tar-covered fur and a crazy kind of squid or octopus kind of tongue, and it eats the some of the cryptobiotes that fall out of the next thing we're going to talk about, the Chrysalis. And it starts licking up the tar like it's milk. So the only thing to note about this cat is it's probably the ship's mouser. Back in the day, ships always had an official mouser, a cat that was in charge of hunting mice on the ship, because it was like kind of a bad deal to have a mice or rat infestation on a ship when you had long journeys across the sea and you had to bring your food with you. You can't have little rodents and vermin getting into your food and corrupting it all. What you guys gonna eat? You're gonna starve. It's gonna be bad. So they had cats. They even in World War II, I think they still had a lot of ships had an official mouser that was on the ship. Maybe it was World War I. I'm thinking of. I think it was World War I. There were still a lot of ships, but the practice was kind of retired. Just as ship technology has gotten better, there's been less need to have, rodent eradication on a ship. But it appears that this ship probably has a need for a mouser. Now, these mice are not going to be regular old mice. It's like we see, if it's tar that it's licking up and it's cryptobiotes that it's eating up, then it's probably other like chiral creatures, like little small chiral things that get on a ship. Because it's a big ship, right? And maybe they can't always like scan it or always know everything that's going on in it all the time. But if they have a little chiral creature themselves that's friendly to them and can kind of go out and hunt the other ones, well, then that's probably the purpose of this mouser on this ship. So it may be kind of a really important character is what I'm getting at. Because if you know anything about stories that take place on a ship, a lot of them involve, a little tiny something that goes overlooked. So anyways, let's move on. The second thing I want to talk about is the Chrysalis. That's kind of the second big thing shown in the trailer. Because the way I figured, I know that first shot has Fragile and Captain George in it, but like everybody knows Fragile already. Her face is covered up with the mask. George's face is not covered up, and his is the new face. And he's holding the light, and he's doing a lot more of the movement and stuff. So it's kind of likening him, I think, as to like the guy that you're supposed to have your attention drawn to first. And one other thing to note about him. Imagine him and Fragile as just the doctor and the nurse that wake you up in the phantom pain. It's like another version of that scene, kind of, for whoever's in this Chrysalis, at least. Yeah. So, as in this may be like filling in the parts of the story before the phantom pain, anyways. So, or I shouldn't say fill in so much as be like, it's going to be symbolically referential to that stuff, probably. And in that way, it can help you fill it in. So anyways, the Chrysalis, it's called a Chrysalis. I've seen people call it a sarcophagus, and I think that's fine because of the shape it's in. And you can kind of call it a coffin if you want to, and that's kind of fine because of the shape it's in. But also, if you want to get nitpicky and really investigate this stuff, in investigation, details matter. and it's not a coffin. It's not called a coffin by any of the other characters within. It's Captain George calls it a chrysalis later on in the trailer, but it's a chrysalis. So we need to go with it as that, and not think of it as like a sandstone sarcophagus with all these potential Egyptian connections and stuff like that. Because if we've already decided in our mind what it is, then what it is not going to be able to speak to us. You see what I'm saying? So we're going to go off by what they call it in the trailer. It's a chrysalis. First thing you should think of with chrysalis is, like I've been saying, butterfly stuff, right? There's pupa, larva, and then chrysalis, and then imago. So presumably, we're seeing kind of an imago part of this, because if this is the chrysalis being broken open and there's a creature inside it that's fully grown, and there's still all this liquefied stuff kind of left over, like I was saying, how there's kind of this gross middle process while the larva's in the cocoon, in the pupa stage, and it kind of liquefies, and it's kind of gross, but then in that liquid it grows into the full butterfly, and it's kind of a beautiful thing. Well, this butterfly doesn't have the kind of wings we expected. Her arms are littered with these spinal kind of looks like spinal suckers, actually, kind of like you would see on an octopus or a squid. I haven't really looked up into the specifics of the all the speciation stuff yet, basically, and what species this is referencing, but the obvious thing that I think most people are going to think of is octopus, because in the previous trailer there was this shot of the BB pod empty, and Sam said Lou, and then there's this octopus arm that comes up from the inside of the pod, and it's kind of like, what? What's going on there? And with this octopus kind of looking kind of arm going on, I think we're supposed to draw a connection between those two. Whether or not they're setting us up is another question, though. But I would think of this primarily as like there's kind of an octopus thing going on with her arm. So maybe her previous form before going through this chrysalis transformation was an octopus. Could imply that, if this is Louise in here, if this is Lou, then maybe she's gone through a few transformations. But I think there's more questions than there are answers here. So it's probably best to keep an open mind as to the octopus stuff. The one thing you can kind of definitively say, though, is that thing is squirting venom out. A spine that's shooting something that's poisonous, well, that's venom. So again, there's more Metal Gear and the Phantom Pain stuff going on here. And if you notice, too, when those spines are being yanked on, her skin turns red and becomes irritated. She has allergies, so it's like another form of aphenphosmphobia. She's afraid of touch, and instead of just having like an allergic reaction to touch, she has kind of a more violent reaction. She appears to want to try to like defend herself with a type of venom. Now, this venom it's a tar, but it has the effects of timefall, and it goes through Fragile's glove. So it's an acidic substance as well. There's a lot of layers to that. Well, let's just get to it. So the third note is Fragile here. And this is kind of the point where if you haven't really noticed that that's Fragile yet, the mask comes off, and you can see that's Lea Seydoux. So the mask itself is kind of a cool deal. It looks like it's an autonomous pair of hands, right? And there's this question of whose hands are they, I think. But because obviously they're being controlled remotely by somebody, right? Which is really funny to think about, somebody who's constantly kind of got their hands on her chest and around her neck, but also, it's helpful, right? Interesting stuff. But they're called second hands. Kojima in a tweet has specified they're calling them her second hands, or second hand possibly. Which, like, it's a second set of hands, but they're really not because like 1, 2, these are my first and second hands, right? You could think of them as a third and fourth hand in one way. So it's like a second pair of hands. But I think another reason he's calling them second hands and not like something else is because a second hand relates to clocks. I think a big kind of hidden theme in this whole trailer is time and kind of the ethereal nature of time, if we view it from certain perspectives, let's say. And so a second hand, kind of suggests that there's also a minute hand and an hour hand. Kind of these missing hands, yet again. So, anyways, getting back to the timefall of Tar, when it hits her hand, obviously she takes her glove off, and we can see her hands. She's still young, and it makes her old in the spot where it's gone through the gloves. And that shot where she's holding her hand up and she's got the substance on her hand and she's looking at her hand, and the woman who's caused this is behind it, and it was caused by a type of, let's say, ejaculation. Y'all, this is an Evangelion reference. That's Shinji's hand. It's Shinji's hand. He's looking at his hand, and obviously he's jerking off over Asuka in like a terrible, low moment for his character. This is kind of like an opposite of that, right? In a lot of ways, I think you could kind of think of this woman on the table in the Chrysalis, as kind of like another Asuka a little bit, maybe. And which, why is fragile Shinji? And, and again, it's like, it's a black substance this time, right? Everything's kind of flipped over. Her hand is literally flipped over. I think the perspective of the shot is quite literally reversed. Shinji's standing on kind of an opposite side of the bed to Asuka in that shot, in that whole scene, than compared to what both of them are standing on the opposite side of the bed of, I guess it's L's character on the table here. Although I'm going to get back to L because there's curious things going on with this character in the Chrysalis, which we're just going to have to get back to. But yeah, there's an Evangelion reference that he snuck in here, and he twisted it around a lot and made it kind of a horror thing. But with the whole like pulling on the thorn thing or the spine, and then the way it shoots out, and it's immediately on her hand, and she's disgusted by it and reacted the way she does. And then the way that shot is a POV shot, it's just, they if they weren't trying to reference Evangelion, well, gosh darn it, they just happened to accidentally do it perfectly. So the next thing to talk about is BB. Because the next shot is BB in the stomach. And BB's got tar tears now, kind of like Cliff had, and like we saw in the previous trailer, like Fragile had at one point too. So I think that means that BB's somehow linked to the beach now. And, this tar tears thing is also something that Higgs has, but not in quite the same way. His may be like mascara. He may be trying to fake what the real thing is, basically. I think he can kind of do it while he's on the beach, though, if I remember correctly. In that end fight, I think he actually does finally have like some real tar tears. But I think it's the tar thing. If you haven't heard me say it before, and I don't think I've said this in a while, the way tar and water work in Death Stranding's world is they're kind of chiral versions of one another. So every time Sam dies and he goes to the seam, his body is down in the water, right? So he's lifeless. His mouth is open. Presumably his stomach is full of water. Then when he repatriates and he goes back into the real world, every single time he pukes up tar. The cryptobiotes that were floating around in the water and got in his stomach are then puked up as tar in cryptobiotes. So the water transmutates as he's going from the beach back to the real world as water into tar. Which means any water that you take with you from the real world back over into the beach becomes tar on the beach. Does that make sense? So the reason he's crying tar is because in the real world he's crying tears. in his sort of moment of death, you could say. And those tears translate over into the other side as tar. So that's why Cliff is crying tar. That's why Fragile cries tar after she's shot and she shows up on the beach. She had tears in her eyes when she was shot. So, same thing with Cliff. Cliff was crying, when he was hugging Sam there right before time restarts and he's shot. The same thing must have happened with BB, which means BB is a repatriate. BB's probably somehow still tied to the beaches and isn't able to come back into reality yet. Seems to be it's kind of like what was going on with Cliff. Cliff wasn't maybe a full-on repatriate before he was killed, but I've speculated already that BB was definitely a repatriate because of the things we see at the end of Death Stranding. When BB dies, is taken to the incinerator and revives, that's a repatriation. It's delayed at the end of Death Stranding 1. I've said this in my previous time I've talked about it in this video, but basically the mechanics of that repatriation loop work by literally the story has to be built, has to be told, has to be acted out. And so the last part of BB's repatriation loop is being brought to the furnace and then being held there in Sam's hands and being hugged. That's the last part of the loop, the hug. That's when BB wakes up. The hug links BB and Sam's hug to Cliff and Sam's hug. It kind of back in time, you would say, or on the beach, perhaps. The hugs link also to Amelie and Sam's hug. The hugs become kind of like a meme, and it brings the cycle to a kind of point of completion where it can actually become a loop. And so the loop makes BB a repatriate, essentially. So whoever shot and killed Lou it probably wasn't Higgs, and I'll get to that later, but it definitely wasn't Higgs. It was probably someone else working for BB. Because I think BB's actually making a lot of plans here. Because BB kind of exists eternally on the beach outside of time already. And this gets into crazy stuff, but we'll get back into it when I get to point number 12. But BB's... and this is not Lou, this is BB specifically. Because BB and Lou might be a little bit different. Which, again, we'll get to. Well, no, let's mention it now. At the very end of the trailer, there's a little scene between... little dialogue between Sam and Deadman. And Deadman starts talking about how BB-28 was incinerated long before Sam ever met the BB that he thought was BB-28. So here we have evidence that BB-28's been swapped out, and that there's been some kind of foul play going on. So it could be possible that BB-28 in the previous game might not have been Lou the whole time. It might have been some other BB that's connected to Lou, perhaps, or something like that. And that when BB died, that BB went off, and then Lou was the one who repatriated into this BB. Maybe. What I'm saying is this is all magical stuff, right? So there could be like sleight of hand and kind of trickery going on because BB is kind of indistinguishable from other BBs. I would assume that there's kind of a sort of uniformity between all BB units that's probably made to be that way. I don't know how they do it, but Bridges probably has some way of like making sure that like the developmental part of all these babies are kind of physically mostly the same, that they're mostly indistinguishable, and once they become distinguishable, it seems like their purpose as a BB would sort of like it wouldn't be possible to meet that purpose. Essentially, there's like an archetypal nature. You see what I'm saying? And it's like once you become more of a specific image of your own self, it's like you kind of lose touch with that sort of universal archetypal thing that links all the other BBs together and makes BBs work as they do. Anyways, the other thing to mention about this BB here in the belly, with the with the Magellan coming out, it's kind of a Metal Gear reference. A lot of people think of the Metal Gear thing because it's kind of like a nano machine. It's like that movie. Martin Short. I'm gonna have to look this up. Apologies. Inner Space. That movie, Inner Space. God, I can't believe I forgot it for a second there. Excuse me. Dennis Quaid, Martin Short. It's a great movie. Go check it out. Basically, it's a ship that's like normal sized is shrunk down into a nano sized little bot that's put inside a pill, and it's meant to be used as like an experimental thing for military purposes and all this stuff. And it accidentally gets put into this schmuck, Martin Short's character, and the guy who's inside has to like figure out what's happened, and the people who were supposed to be doing this experiment don't know what happened, and so it's a whole like debacle. It's a comedy movie and it's hilarious. In a lot of ways, the Magellan's kind of like it's like a nano machine, tiny little thing, little machine inside of a body. There's also this little thing I wrote down here. With the sense of scale, there's a reference to the old Konami game Life Force, which is one of the greatest games, essentially like ported for American arcades and such. They reskinned it to be, instead of like an outer space kind of context, into a inside a body context, actually. It made everything kind of organic, and it's kind of gross if you really think about it, but since it was early 8-bit 16-bit kind of stuff, it didn't get too gross, so it was more fun. Kind of Magic School Bus kind of context is what I think of too, a little bit. So anyways, that's enough about BB. Speaking of the Magic School Bus, let's talk about the boat. That's number 5 here. So one thing to note real quick about the armory, the first thing we see is, there's guns on the wall, but there's also a VR headset there. A few people have noticed this, but if you didn't notice it, that's probably what's going on in there. While she was talking about putting guns through their paces, she means in VR. There are 5 crew rooms. We're shown that hallway that's got 4 of them, and then off the center hallway is the showers. It looks like there could possibly be another hallway there with more rooms beyond that kind of portal, but with Sam's room and the 4 rooms we see here, there's 5 total. There's probably more crew than 5, but there's like these 5 crew rooms, and then there's probably like rooms for specific crew elsewhere. I'm sure the captain has his own room. Fragile being the commander, she probably has her own special quarters, stuff like that. So, this boat is a submarine. So, the colors change when they're submerged. Everybody's wondering, why are they blue? Was that a mistake? Blah, blah, blah. No, y'all, they're underwater. And again, the water here is tar, and we see the Magellan submerge itself into tar. What's probably happening when it submerges itself into tar is it's going into the beach. They're going onto the beach. Like, they're not really in the tar once they go under the tar. They're kind of metaphorically on the beach. Being submerged in that tar is symbolically the same thing as being submerged in the waters of the seam. So because of Death Stranding's whole thing, that's what literally happens. When the Magellan goes under the tar, it goes to the beach. It's like when Sam gets pulled into the tar, what happens? He goes to the beach. So that's what's going on here. When they're underwater, they are all essentially kind of dead in a way. You could think of them. They're not really dead, but they're just on the beach. They're kind of in the world of the dead. And that's why it's blue. It's still blue. Just like how Sam's was at the end of Death Stranding. It's probably related to that whole deal, why Sam's world was blue, or why his beach was blue. All of the beaches are probably blue now. And this is probably happening also because the networks were all hooked up. And so, like, being underwater in one place where the tar is allows you to emerge anywhere else that there's tar. Enough tar for you to kind of come through the portal, you could say. You could think of those tar pools like wormholes. They're going into a wormhole event horizon, and they're going to come out the other side. And what's in between kind of isn't directly connected via spatial connections. It's connected in, kind of the way the game works, more via the beach. And you could kind of understand that as more like memetics, is what I would think of it as. So, the last thing to mention with the boat, and one more thing is, so when they go underwater, if you notice, I'm going to talk about this next too, but Sam's hair is white when we first see it. It's kind of difficult to tell, but if you think about what his hair would look like if it was black, and you compare his hair color to Fragile's hair color right next to him, and you know that her hair color is kind of this dirty blonde brownish kind of color, And his is, well, if it's a darker brown, it should be darker than hers, but it's not. It's a lot lighter than hers because it's still white. So when he gets on the boat, he's got white hair, and they submerge and they die. So when they come back up, it's sort of like they've repatriated, and his hair's black again. I think that kind of implies that everybody on that boat probably has to have some kind of link to the other side and have some level of dooms, I'm guessing, in order for this to be possible at all. Because they're constantly going to the beach and coming back from it by all these trips on the Magellan. That's probably also why she's probably not super worried about her hand getting aged and why her whole body is not aged. She's been to the beach and back again. She's repatriated, essentially. And it's kind of curious if you look at George Miller's character. He's probably a lot older than he looks, possibly. Aging might not be a thing for some of these people in the same way. There's a lot of things to kind of be considered here, but the last thing here is that they get into an elevator. It's kind of curious. Nobody's really noticed or talked about it, but why do they have an elevator on this ship? Most ships have stairs and ladders because, especially submarines, if you think about what an elevator would have to do in a submarine to work, come on. So the fact that they can make an elevator work inside this boat tells me a lot about the nature of this boat. And the elevators themselves, and having conversations as the characters walk up to it and wait and then get in and have more conversation. Y'all, that's Star Trek stuff. That's like the turbo lifts and any other show that's used elevator stuff. I think Mad Men used it a lot, although I haven't watched Mad Men. 30 Rock uses it a little bit. But I mostly think of the turbo lifts in Star Trek, The Next Generation, and a little bit in Deep Space Nine, although they don't do as many turbo lift things. But they did have a turbo lift in Deep Space Nine, because it was like, you can tell they didn't really need it, but it was almost like they were like, oh, no, we kind of do need it. So they just added it, Anyways, the turbo lifts kind of liken the Magellan to the Enterprise to me, And the Enterprise is not just the name of a spaceship, y'all. It was originally the name of a wooden boat, right? So, it's all in kind of the same ballpark, I think. So anyways, next person to talk about is Sam. And I've talked about his white hair being gone. And I think, like I said, when he gets on the boat and the trailer starts up and he's in that room, they're underwater, under the tar, kind of on the beach. And so his white hair that he went into the boat with is going to be gone when they reemerge. Everything's going to be kind of refreshed. It's sort of like his body is reborn. It makes me wonder if he won't have a new hand on him. He probably won't. But maybe he will. I don't know. You can also note in this shot he's got a new suit. It's kind of shaped a lot like his old Bridges suit, but there's a lot of new changes to it. It's a darker suit, and it's got some camouflage pattern on it. The exoskeleton on it looks a little bit different. There's parts of the exoskeleton that go down his arm, which wasn't present on the other exoskeletons. So it looks like their exoskeleton technology has advanced. The attachment points on his shoulders are different. There's still that triangle shape, but the interior part of it's changed around a little bit. And the design of the individual bars, it's a lot less simplistic. It's a little more detailed now. And they're yellow. They're colored, which I think is cool. They look fancier, it looks like it's like the ones he had in Death Stranding were like they're government issue, they're very basic, and the ones here in Death Stranding 2 are private sector versions of the government issue basic stuff. Other things to note about his suit. Let's see here. He's got a new connection point on the sides of his legs. The triangular ones that were down there are gone now. And they're replaced with like a single kind of 2-point line looking connector that's just on a little further up on his legs, I think. At first when I saw it, it looked like a holster or maybe a holster connector. But now I'm not so sure. It might be holsters, but it might be like there's a new kind of container or something that we're going to have to attach down there possibly. Because, there might not be as much of a focus on like gathering materials in this game. Presumably materials are not going to be a problem. So instead of gathering materials, they might have to come up with something else for us to move around, essentially. And so that might have to do with whatever's going on with his leg connector points. Let's see here. He's got a new harness as well. Some of the bags and stuff that he has looks pretty similar to his Bridges issue harness, but it looks like he's got extra leg mag pouch down on his left or right leg, I should say. It looks like he's also got his regular mag pouch up on his belt, or mag box, maybe you would say, or ammo box. And some of the other elements are kind of the same, but some of them have changed up a little bit. I'm not as, knowledgeable as that kind of stuff, so I'll let that be something other people hopefully can kind of cover better. But his whole suit looks like it's been revamped a little bit in some way. Everything's changed a little bit. Oh, and the cupids are also obviously, he's got these black coffin shaped cupids now. So we'll get back to that here in a little bit. The next thing to talk about is the Faith doll. That's the little doll that's animated. Is the director's name is Faith Aiken. So this little Faith Aiken doll, that I'm going to call him, is really cool. A lot of people like him. I didn't write this down, but I'll just note this. A lot of people are noting the comparisons to Alan Wake's new appearance in his game. And, as much as Sam and Hideo have worked together in the past, because they worked together on Control. Hideo did a little DLC for Control back in like 2019 or so. So they've got some collaborative history there. I think they like each other. They tell stories, kind of similar stories. Maybe this was made on purpose, but I didn't see the Alan Wake kind of connection myself. I saw him with the bow tie and his kind of 5 o'clock shadow kind of stuff going on. The only thing that's really strongly kind of tying him to Alan Wake's character, I think, is the way his hair is parted. I guess the color of his hair as well. But the length of his hair is different. And then the color of his outfit, I think, is kind of similar. So if you want to make that connection, I think that's fine. But, I think there's also other connections to make, possibly. With it being a Faith doll. It's Faith. And it's a doll, so it's a Faith doll. So that, there may be kind of a obvious kind of theming thing going on there with maybe this doll's whole deal is about having faith, right? Or there's something about it. He's also, I don't know how to pronounce this. I think it's Bunraku dolls, Bunraku puppet dolls that are done in Japan. They have this, I think it's Japan. There's it's like a normal, face of usually a geisha-looking woman who's got like the painted white face and a wig and everything, and she's just talking normally, and then they'll have like a little thing they can pull, and the cheeks will split open, and the eyes will usually like open in a different way and reveal like a set of teeth and red eyes, and it looks like a demon woman kind of hiding behind the mask. There's kind of this two-sidedness to it, right? No light without the dark, I think, is kind of the message there. There's no funny without, kind of the other side of things. Like how all humor and levity are all kind of balance-based things, right? So the other thing to note about the Faith doll is that it's animated, a little bit oddly. Whenever the doll is moved by outside forces, it moves at the normal frame rate. But whenever the doll moves from its own internal forces by its own animation, it's animated at a certain frame rate that's lower than the regular frame rate, like much animation is. I can't tell you exactly which one this is. It looks like it's on the 4s, maybe, which means like every 4th frame. So if it's like, I think on the 4s would be like in that 1/12th of a frame, I think, or something like that, 1/12th. Anyways, I'm not as well versed in that side of stuff, but I suspect the rate at which it's animated probably has something to do with, the theming behind the character, the face stuff. Maybe its own individual story is kind of related to it. Maybe the doll was, imbued with the life force of somebody who's on the beach, and because maybe this person, used this doll a lot in their life and kind of imbued their own life force in it, so that when they passed away, maybe the circumstances of their death somehow linked it to this doll which survived, and the sort of like the cause linked to the doll, which is funny. Higgs calls it a soulless, little puppet, which we're getting to Higgs here in a sec. But I think it's quite obviously not soulless. It looks like a thing that's got a claw attached to it to me. That would explain the time dilation, you would say, like why it's animating in the way it is. It's not really time dilation, but you could think of it like that, right? So anyways, that's enough about the Faith doll. Let's move on. Next one's number 8, the drop-ins. So after we see the little bit and Sam leaves the ship, and there's some cool lines and cool sights and stuff, but it sounds to me like the dialogue between Sam and Fragile here is largely constructed and cut together. Essentially, it's a bunch of drop-ins. And the stuff that they say to each other there probably isn't a real conversation that's going to be had in the final game. Maybe like parts of it that's been cut up. But I suspect that there might even be a part of it that's like from way later in the game that's cut in with some stuff from way earlier or something like that. It seems like there may be a deal going on where he's showing us mostly stuff from a prologue of the game, and then he's also showing us some stuff from like somewhere in the middle of the game mashed in with the prologue stuff to make it seem like it's all happening at the same time, But what I'm getting at is if you look back at the stuff he revealed in Death Stranding 1, in Death Stranding's trailers, its first 2 or 3 trailers, really its first 3 trailers, he didn't reveal a lot of really big story stuff. Like the way he revealed the stuff that he revealed wasn't really betraying a lot of the story. It was kind of giving us hints as to something here, something there, but it really ultimately didn't lead us directly to what the game was going to tell us. Because that's not the way Kojima does it. He's not going to like spoil his game's story in a trailer. He's going to give you a story in the trailer that's supposed to get you into the bigger story. But that story that he gives you in the trailer is not the bigger story. It's its own little deal. He kind of takes his own bigger story and makes a little story out of it to kind of pull you in. And that's what I think's going on here. Is I think he's maybe kind of deceiving us with some of these lines about the UCA's expansion and stuff like that. And all the stuff about Mexico and what they're talking about there. But, that's speculation, and I don't want to get too much into it. But I would just say go back to those lines and maybe kind of interrogate them yourself and see what you can figure out. Okay, so number 9. The next thing to talk about are the tar lines. We see this shot, a series of shots of Sam walking through, and Fragile says that, the Death Stranding's far from over. And we see tar in the landscape that's just like dripping upwards, and there's these long lines of it like cheese dripping off a pizza. And, the tar in the previous game didn't really follow that pattern. It would kind of like break free in these little chunks and kind of float in a little bit of a wavy pattern. Sometimes it would go straighter, but usually there's more of an emanating kind of feel, kind of like a gaseous kind of volume moving up, and not like a line of stuff that's moving straight up or down. It kind of speaks of water retention on a fishing line to me, actually. The way if you leave a fishing line out early in the morning and you go check it, like if you put it out before dawn and you go check it right at dawn, there'll be a lot of dew built up on that thing, kind of even kind of wicked up from the lake, or just wicked out of the atmosphere of the pond, whatever it's in. And you kind of have to, as soon as you vibrate or touch the line, all this moisture will fall off of it. I think that kind of is what reminds or makes the tar doing the thing that it's doing in the trailer kind of reminds me of that. And then, so these tar chunks are going in lines now, right? And I've talked about how his leg skeleton has these new points on it. They're not triangles, they're kind of lines, right? And these bots that we see here in a little bit are also being held up by these kind of in slightly visible, look like kind of fishing line type deals. It's like an invisible line that with the light passing through it at a certain angle, then you can see it, And it kind of seems like the tar is going up on the same kind of line that we see going down to these bots. They're kind of like, puppet strings a little bit, right? They're evocative of puppet strings, at least I think they are. But they also look like they're not physical objects, right? They look like it's more like light itself. So it's like the fishing line is light. as if it's like a data stream, perhaps, or something like that. You think of fiber optics, how fiber optics can transfer a whole lot of data really, really fast. Maybe that's how these bots are hooked up to a network. Maybe the network has something going on in space. Maybe there's some kind of space station or satellite kind of something going on up above Earth's atmosphere that we haven't been told about yet that is working into how these bots and the chiral network works. Possibly. Moving on. Oh, the last thing to note here, that shot with the moon in the background. I said this on Twitter, but I'll say it here too. That's called a lensing effect. Whenever the Earth's, or I should say whenever the sun or the moon travel across Earth's horizon, either setting or rising, if you look at it, that's when it's the largest. It's a natural thing that happens whenever a celestial body passes across a horizon on a planet when viewed from a planet with atmosphere. Because of Earth's atmosphere, the matter essentially in our atmosphere acts like a big lens around the whole planet, and stuff that's passing through that lens directly above it, right, through the sort of, you could think of it as the thinnest point, you would say it looks probably most accurate to how you would really see it and how, like, the size differences and everything. And as it's getting down and down further closer to the horizon, if you think of a spherical atmosphere, right, it's all the way around. Well, as the sun's up here, you get the light passing through it. It's a very short distance, but you turn it this way, and the sun's over here. It's passing through a lot more atmosphere because it's this little bit has turned sideways, and you can think of it. It's kind of like there's more stuff that it's going through to get through to get through the atmosphere to get to your eyes, essentially, right? So, because it's not just passing straight down, it's got to go through the horizon and then all the way kind of at an angle, right? That angular stuff passing through all that stuff has an effect of magnifying the image. I know I kind of over-explained that a little bit, I'm sorry. But essentially, it's like, you can view this if you have glasses, you kind of turn it to the side, and there's a little bit of a magnification effect that you can kind of see in... if you have good vision. I can't see it, obviously, because I am nearsighted, which means stuff far away is really blurry to me. So, anyways, the amount of lensing that the moon has undergone, though, is not normal. That is a really big moon, like bigger than any moon you'll ever see, probably, hopefully, in your life. If you ever see a moon that big, it's happening because there's a crap ton of stuff in the atmosphere. Essentially, the way that lensing effect works is the density of the material it's passing through determines the refraction index, essentially. And so the greater the density of the volume of the material it's passing through, the greater the refraction, the bigger the magnification. So that means perhaps after the end of the first game, when we've cleared all the chiralium clouds out of the atmosphere, something else was left there, but it's sort of less than visible. Something like nitrogen gases are invisible. A lot of the regular stuff in our air is invisible, right? It's most like there's a sort of visible effect to it, right? That's why the sky looks blue. But and that's mostly because of the moisture, right, and the refraction and all that. But it's it's because of the specific, also like the specific makeup of our atmosphere that gives it the color it has, and gives other planets the colors they have because they have different chemical makeups and such. So, with all that said, the lensing is greater because there's more stuff in the atmosphere. Yeah. So, anyways, moving on. Number 10. This dude who says this line that bots are capable of deliveries with APAS and all the chiral network coverage. Who the hell is this guy? We heard him speaking at the end of the first trailer, and we don't know who he is. And now we're hearing him speaking again, and he's talking about bots are capable of doing all this. He sounds like the bad guy, y'all. This guy sounds like the real bad guy. Like, I know Higgs is a villain, and we're about to talk about Higgs next. And don't worry, we're going to talk about... But this other guy who's like talking about bots and like, does he not seem like the world's biggest capitalist scum to y'all? Like this, I don't know who they got for this voice actor, but he's playing this guy like the world's coldest businessman. His voice acting that he's giving is like a almost irreverent and like relishing in his irreverence, the way a lot of capitalists kind of enjoy putting a dollar sign on everything that you think is sacred, you know. I wonder who that guy is. And with that said, let's go to number 11. We're going to talk about the Borg. Y'all, the Borg are back. They're going to tell us resistance is futile, and you got to just give them the finger, okay? Higgs has turned himself into a cyborg. What a moron. God, this guy. And everybody said, oh, he looks like the Joker. And yeah, sure, but it's a reference to The Crow. If you've seen the movie The Crow, then you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen that movie and you want to play Death Stranding and you're interested in Higgs' character, you got to go see The Crow. The lore of that character explains a whole lot of why Higgs is doing the stuff he's doing. For example, so The Crow is essentially a man who's murdered and dies and then is resurrected, kind of instilled by the spirit of vengeance itself. And in this process, he loses his memories. And he can gain his memories back, sort of, you could say, by finding objects that he touched while he was alive and touching those objects, and then the memories that he sort of like had in his life associated with those objects come back to him as the Crow. Really powerful stuff. That's why he touches the BB pod. The whole, like, his hair, kind of coming up a little bit and there being kind of this sound effect and everything when he touches the pod. He's making a connection there. He doesn't know what he's doing, actually. Because he's the Crow, right? He's kind of ignorant. He's without context. He's just a spirit of vengeance. And now the Brandon Lee's character in The Crow is badass, and he's the good guy. Higgs might not be the bad guy this time, but I think he thinks he's the bad guy, is what I'm getting at. He also, in a way, thinks he's the good guy, but that's what makes it. The way he thinks he's the good guy is how he's thinking he's the bad guy. It's the same thing, He drops a Talking Heads reference. Same as it ever was. That is a Talking Heads song reference. The Talking Heads is a band. Let's just not worry about the band. Why is he dropping a Talking Heads reference? Because what is Higgs? It's a head, fleshy looking head, and an android body. Y'all, he's a cyborg. It's a head by itself on a robot body. He's doing the thing that I've been saying was done to possibly Chico and was definitely done to Raiden in Metal Gear Solid 2. In Metal Gear Solid 2, Raiden is just a head. Okay, and I've said this, it's the head of Big Boss that was left after it was crushed by the giant monkey Venom in 1984. It was taken and it was put away in some kind of catacombs or something, some kind of a sarcophagus coffin or something, and it was hooked up to a network, and that fleshy head controls stuff out in the world until it's allowed and kind of determined that he's learned his lesson and he's like able to go out again. And then they put that fleshy head on top of a robot body, and that's Raiden in Metal Gear Solid 4. Raiden in Metal Gear Solid 2 is a robot body. The fleshy head is down inside Arsenal gear the whole time, and he's controlling the robot body in a virtual reality recreation of reality. He's like streaming reality to himself, thinking that he's in reality. And the robot's really doing the stuff that he thinks he's doing, but it's the robot doing the stuff. Same thing's going on with Higgs here. Higgs is on the beach, he's stuck there, and he's remotely controlling this body. Now here's the screwed up part. That head is not his head. He's killed somebody and put their head on, or possibly he's grown a body or taken a dead body and reanimated it, but it seems most likely to me that he's taken somebody who died via some kind of a chiral event, some kind of chiralium related something, because that would be the only way he could get to him. And he got the head attached to a robot body somehow before the head died, or maybe it did die and he resurrected it. I don't know. But it looks like he's also done maybe some genetic therapy on the head to sort of make it change its appearance a little bit, because it doesn't look right. It's not Troy Baker's face. The makeup and everything makes it kind of hard to tell, but I'm pretty sure that that's not 100% Troy Baker's face. The lips especially look different. The lips looks like somebody else's lips. So I think he's stolen somebody's face and head, and he's put it on this body, and he's stylized it to his own ends, which is kind of what the player does in the Phantom Pain with the Avatar creator. Yeah. So Higgs is a jackass. The other thing to note is that he's added these feathered wings on the side of his eyeliner, and it's kind of a Kefka looking thing. It's also, the wings, like I've been saying with Sahelanthropus. It seems like Higgs has been watching my video essays and has just stolen all this stuff I've been talking about, as if like it's because I've talked about it that this is all happening. Which I really hope that's the case, because that's the only way we're getting out of this shit. So anyways, the question, I guess, is whose head is that? But yeah, that's an android Borg body that's being controlled remotely. And yeah, he's got a guitar. He ripped off Devil May Cry 3 or whatever. Big deal. It's also a railgun, and he plays, a song he didn't write. See what I'm saying? Everything about this character is stolen from other ideas that he's gotten from other things. Nothing about this Higgs'borg is original, unfortunately, that I could find. And thus it ever was, that the unoriginal are painfully obvious. Anyways, let's move on. Number 12. The last thing to talk about is really, this is a bunch of stuff. We got to talk about Lou. Because the freaking cyborg ninja shows back up. Oh, wait, it's not a ninja. It's a samurai. You get it? Samurai. Okay, anyways. Sorry. Yes, because it is a samurai. The sword that's wielded by that, I'm going to call it a robot, is a curved blade. It's like a katana. Katanas are curved blades. Ninjas don't use katanas. Ninjas use straight blades, more like a nodachi. Cyborg Ninja, Fox's blade in Metal Gear Solid 1 was a straight edge. This one's curved, so it's a samurai. And it's BB. It's got Sam's Odra deck from the last game. It's got the same shape, and it's making BB noises, y'all. It's BB. It may not be BB-28. It may not be Luis, but it might be Luis. Luis would have a real good reason to be mad at Higgs, I would think, after they're beefing, right? That's what everybody's saying. It fits, so I don't see any reason to question that. But I also think we need to, there's clearly a lot of missing context here. We need to figure out what's been going on between these two. And why is Higgs so surprised by this? Well, I think what happened was when Higgs touched that BB pod and made that connection, that gave Lou a path there. And so Lou was probably able to hack into the biggest, strongest bot that was in the immediate area and maybe do some stuff to it to make it bigger even, possibly, and give it that sword and then send it over there and start screwing up all of Higgs' stuff. BB is laughing during this whole fight. Y'all, BB's playing with him. Higgs is just getting toyed with. If you really look and analyze the moves that samurai is using on Higgs in that fight, he wasn't trying to kill Higgs, or it wasn't trying to kill Higgs. I should say it, because it's a bot. It's just testing him. It just wants to see what Higgs is capable of. He's just playing. He's just being played with, man. And it's like I said, I think Higgs is he's in a little over his head in this game, I think, and he doesn't realize it. But anyways, so Lou is there playing with Higgs. The next scene, we just got to move on, because there's Gray Fox stuff there, but y'all, you don't need me to tell you all that. Sam's making eggs, y'all. That's Sonny makes eggs in Metal Gear Solid 4. It's a Metal Gear Solid 4 reference. And the eggs are done. It looks like he's already made them, actually, because he's taking them out of the pan. When we just see the bottom of the pan. So it seems like, Sam's finished something. He's made something right. There's this kind of, the egg kind of goes back, I think, to the Chrysalis. Cracking an egg, making an omelet, all that kind of deal going on here. But there's a lot of curious questions. Like I said, how in this dialogue over that shot, Sam is saying that something Higgs told him was that you don't know a damn thing about Lou. And it does seem like Sam's kind of missing a lot of context about Lou. Like we all are, right? Because we haven't been told by the Dead Gum game. Whose fault is that really, right? And Higgs, tries to act like it's Sam's fault, but it's like, no, not really. We know whose fault it is. But I think this goes back to how I was talking about. I think time is kind of a hidden reference or a hidden theme throughout this whole trailer. There's a lot of time stuff. Cooking eggs, time. Right? The eggs being done right after that fight scene. Right? I think that it's all tied together. Like the eggs being done is because of the fight. Right? Like the thing that made the fight happen is what finished the egg, cooked them. Right? I don't know. There's something there. So the last thing to note here is then Elle's character comes back up in that little final shot, and I think we're led to believe that Elle is Louise, that she's been brought up from the tar somehow, and that she's grown up now. But they never really positively identify her as Louise. So maybe we're supposed to question if she is Louise at all. But, I think it's pretty obvious with the whole octopus thing I talked about from the first trailer and then in this trailer with her arm. That woman that has got this, and so we see Elle's got, when she walks away, she's got those invisible light strings, like puppet strings on her. Excuse me. And the woman who's taken out of the sarcophagus has this white blouse on her. And that's the woman who's got the white strings on her that is lowered onto the bed and then strapped down very gingerly by Sam. And she's got black hair, but it looks like it could be blonde hair that's just stained black by all the tar. It looks a lot like Elle's face. So the next thing to talk about then is Shioli Kutsuna. Where's her character? Where's Shioli? We haven't seen anything with her character yet. And so some people were wondering if that lady being pulled down onto the table was Shioli's character, but I don't think it looks quite like Shioli. I think we do see a thing for Shioli's character in this trailer, but we're not sure. They're keeping her hidden for another reveal later. I do think it's safe to assume that Elle is the one with the octopus arms, and that is Louise. It's like a future version of Louise who's maybe been reborn into the timeline somehow. And I think as part of that process, she's kind of become like Venom. She's lost her memories. And so we're going to see what would happen if Venom was a girl, basically. Yeah, I think we're going to kind of see like a girl Eli story going on, right? Because she's blonde, she's on the ship, right? There's a lot of Eli stuff going on there, like I've been talking about. So going back to Shioli's character, the last thing here is that if you pause on that shot of Elle kind of overhearing the conversation that's on the bridge, I guess. And also I want to say that my earlier note about drop-ins and lies through, tricky editing could be going on here too. But assuming they're not doing that conversation they're having in there seems like it's, happening with a few people talking all at once. And one of the things you can kind of make out is a coffin-looking kind of yellow container that's on its side, kind of on the bow of the ship up there. And it makes me wonder if Shioli's character isn't inside that thing, helping operate the ship. We know in the Matrix, there's usually two people that operate the ship. There's kind of the person who drives it, who's like Tank in the Matrix, and then there's Dozer. And Dozer's kind of like the mechanic and the guy who's like down in there, and he's a born and bred human, right? But then also, I'm putting together some references here. Go with me. In The Matrix Reloaded, when the Nebuchadnezzar goes in to dock at Zion, docking control is handled by a group of people they've been plugged, and they're plugged into a little subnet program, a little loading program inside Zion's dock. It's dock control. And it's a bunch of people inside of like their own little version of the Matrix that are at little workstations handling all of like the air traffic control type stuff, you would say. And they're doing this in this space, so it, like the Matrix, it gives them a lot more control and a lot more ability to perform well, right? Like they can do crazier stuff in there. They can kind of observe what's going on better. They probably have a lot more safety kind of stuff going on because of that, right? And so I wonder if the Magellan doesn't run the same way with a character like Shioli Kutsuna kind of like hooked up to the ship in a sort of like in a coffin. If you've ever played Zone of the Enders, there's kind of this thing where the orbital frame itself is kind of dead, and there has to be an AI installed in the orbital frame for it to even kind of be functional. And then you have to have a pilot inside the frame to actually give it life and make it do all the stuff that it does, right? So you need somebody who's like Dingo, right? And then you need somebody like Ada, and then you need Jehudi, right? Well, we've got Magellan, and we've got Shioli, and we've got George. I think that's how this ship is flown. I think it's flown a lot like the orbital frames in Zone of the Enders. Yeah. There's a big thing with puppets and puppeteers going on. We've got people who appear to be puppets but may not be. We've got people who appear to be puppeteers but may be puppets, you know? Well, like the Faith Doll. Sam himself, is he a puppet? You know? We control him. Does he really have his own, you know, kind of soul, right? Like, it's kind of questionable. You know, I think this game's going to get at a lot of, like, the questions of, you know, what makes a soul, what makes a puppet, what makes a puppeteer, and all that kind of stuff. What is control, right? And yeah, with that said, there's my 12 notes. Yeah, and so, you know, I broke it up into 12 because if you've watched my other lectures, you know the relevance of 12. If you don't, go back and watch, I think it's the lecture on missions 23 and 24, White Mamba and Close Contact. I think it's Close Contact where I really talk about it. Oh, no, it's not that. It's the one after. It's 25, I think. Aim true, ye vengeful. Yeah, that's the one with 12. So anyways. Yeah. That's all I have to say about Death Stranding 2. I thought this was going to be a short, quick one, but as I got to talking, I realized I had a lot to say there. If you've watched all this, thanks. Again, apologies for lack of edits. Yeah, I don't think you need me like putting all this stuff up on the screen in front of you. I think it's cooler if I talk about it and you kind of can make the connections yourself and then go back and watch it and then see what clicks. I think a lot of the times when I say a thing and then I put the image of the thing up there, it causes you to kind of not see other stuff that's in the image. And the images in Death Stranding 2 in this whole trailer, they're chock full of stuff, y'all. There's so much stuff to analyze that I feel like if I put up an image and I'm like, go look at this part, in a way I'm kind of causing everybody to miss everything else a little bit, you know? And so I don't want to do that. And so you could just stare at my dumb face the whole time during these, and you can go check it out later. Or, you know, maybe you could pull it up you could have pulled it up on your phone, I guess. I'll suggest that at this point. But anyways, hope y'all have enjoyed. I'm just doing this little video real quick because this trailer dropped and I felt like I needed to do it. It's just everybody's making a Death Stranding 2 analysis, and I need to put some of my words out there about it. But in case you're wondering what I'm really working on, I'm working on Alan Wake 2's story and analyzing it. Doing a whole analysis of, like I've gotten to Return 3, and I haven't even finished Initiation 3. I've been through the game a couple of times. I've got lots of notes. You know, I've got a film degree in a minor in writing, so this is what I do. Analyzing story beats and narrative stuff is just like, it comes second nature to me. So I've been having a lot of fun with that. And I'm going to do a more long form video about that one. And that may actually come before my You Don't Know Jack About Metal Gear video, because of reasons. Anyways. Because Death Stranding 2 reasons. Yeah. So anyways, hope, it's only been a few days since this Death Stranding 2 trailer came out, so these are mostly like, think of this as early impressions. Don't look at this as like a full in-depth analysis, a full breakdown. It's going to take a while for somebody to figure that out, and anybody who's telling you they got it all figured out is lying to you. So keep an open mind out there, folks. Stay frosty and try to enjoy this phase before we learn more about Death Stranding 2, because this is kind of the fun part. At least I'm having fun. I hope you are too. With that said, peace.